footage. I was in a really beautiful spot on the North Wales coast on this day, looking across the shallow bay towards the mountains of Snowdonia. And the objective of this session was just to float fish for garfish and really simply enjoy the surroundings. And I did have some spinners with me, some lures, in case any bass were showing or any mackerel, but really I just wanted to float fish on this day, just be outside, be out in the environment. It's such a beautiful location. It's just a pleasure to be out. And I do enjoy eating garfish. I know a lot of people don't like them because they think they're bony and they've got green bones, but if you know how to fillet them correctly, they're absolutely delicious, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube showing you how to prepare garfish, so I'd encourage you to look those up. It's a really tasty fish. It's not quite so strong as mackerel, but still healthy and nice meaty firm flesh. Well, anyways, you can see here I'm setting up my rod. It's a Hardy Smuggler 10-foot spinning rod. Travel, so it's a travel model, that is, and so it's in 5 sections. I was using a Staal VS 150 Bailess spinning reel, and here I'm just putting on the float. I've already started rigging up. I've put a bead on before the float, then the float, then another bead, then the weight, as you can see here, then another bead, and all these beads are just acting as buffers against the knots. And now I'm just tying on a stop knot onto the line. Now, normally I'm using Braid, and I use Braid on the reel with a 3-foot fluorocarbon leader for what I normally use this tackle for, which is spinning. On this occasion, because I was float fishing, I tied about a 15-foot 10-pound leader onto the end of that 3-foot leader, because it's just easier to float fish that way. It's easy to tie a stop knot onto the line, and the stop knot just determines the depth of the float fishes. And I was using a number 4 Aberdeen style hook, and these are just strips of mackerel that I save when I take mackerel home to eat. I tend to not eat the belly flesh because I like to save that and cut it into strips as bait. So I'm just taking my first cast here, and as you're about to see, it didn't take long at all. The first garfish to strike. They can be a bit finicky, but this one took the float quite aggressively. It shot straight under on this occasion, and that doesn't always happen. Often garfish play with the bait quite a bit, and the float just moves around a lot. And anyway, I'll come back to that. But you can see this sort of small to medium sized garfish here, and I think they're beautiful fish, quite exotic looking for our waters, I think. Just having my second cast here, and by this point it was apparent that the sea was teeming with garfish. The float was hitting the surface. Sometimes you'd see them jump. It wasn't being picked up in the camera, but because of the wide angle lens. But yeah, there was a lot of fish out there, and you can see it didn't take long again to catch another similar sized garfish, and as I was reading this in, you could see other garfish out of curiosity chasing. There was the old schoolie bass as well, so it was really good to see so much life in the water. As the tide came in and the evening deepened, I decided to move over to the main beach, on the off chance that with a high tide coinciding with a summer's evening, there was always a good chance of seeing a lot of activity, mackerel, continued garfish, maybe a few bass, and maybe even seeing the shoals of whitebait that the fish would have been feeding on, getting chased onto the shingle at my feet. Missing a few bites. That's what happens with garfish. They have a particular way of feeding. They use their bill to knock the fish, they knock it out or stun it, and then they come back and eat it. And that can be why you lose a lot of fish when you're spinning for them, particularly using lures. I think if you want to be certain of catching garfish with any regularity, then float fishing is the way. You have much more control over that. Also what happens a lot when you float fish is the garfish will take the bait and then it will swim up in the water and it will lift the weight that's cocking the float, and so the float will rest flat on the surface of the sea, and this is a telltale sign that you've got garfish. You don't always strike at that point, you still sometimes wait until the fish moves off, and it will eventually take the float under. Sometimes they just play around with the bait for so long that you are just compelled to strike. But I've found when that happens, rarely is it the case that you connect. You still have to just stick it out. It can happen. They can be doing that for minutes with your bait. But if you're patient, eventually it will take the float under, just as happened on this particular occasion when this strike, the float was being played around with, I think, for like nearly 5 minutes, and then eventually it went under, then I struck, connected with another garfish. And then right on cue, just as I had hoped, as the tide peaked in the evening, about an hour before dark, those whitebait that the garfish were feeding on were eventually chased right into the shore, likely by mackerel. So at this point, not only did I collect some of these whitebait because they're nice to eat, fried whole, I decided to put on a Savage Gear Surfseeker lure, which is one of my favourite lures at the moment, and see if I could get a mackerel to finish off the day, and did eventually manage to get one nice fish, and with that I decided to call it a day. I'd had lots of fish, lots of garfish. So I packed up, headed back to the car, and got these fish into the cool bag with ice packs to keep them fresh whilst I was driving home. I had gutted those earlier as well. I love eating fish, and it's really important to look after them correctly, to make sure you gut them as soon as you can after catching them. And those garfish made a fine meal, absolutely beautiful with potato wedges here with some seasoning. I oven baked these garfish fillets with onions and small tomatoes. You can see the green bones there, they don't bother me. Garfish is a delicious fish.